session, we have got Thomas, who is the founder of Addlands, and obviously Brandon and me. How did you guys actually meet?
Joe, it's funny. I when you sent me the questions over last week or earlier this week, I had to send Brandon an email because I'd actually forgotten how we met, and his response was that he wasn't quite sure either.
Yeah,
I do remember coming to your office, and I remember sitting. If you walk out the elevator,
Yeah,
you go left, and there's a couch in the corner.
yeah,
Do you remember sitting there?
yeah.
And I remember coming over to your big screen.
But neither of us remember how it happened.
No,
but the great thing about it
no,
is that it's led to some cool things. So
Yeah,
it's always great to meet like-minded people. The founder's journey can be a very lonely one.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people, unless you're going through the same thing, understand it. It from the outside can look quite glam and very cool and that you're doing well, but underneath you're just a duck on the water paddling as fast as you can. So it's always great to meet like-minded people.
Great analogy. Yeah, you guys came from quite a similar background, didn't you, with both your parents in construction?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, your parents, they remind me what they did.
Dad, construction. Mum, not construction. But yeah, like general contracting works.
Yeah. To be fair, in an industry that's sort of 98% men, it makes sense. My mother wasn't in the construction industry either. I grew up around construction. Even our house was a construction site for most of my childhood. Dad, ever the builder. We had bits of machinery around. I mean, massive excavators and dump trucks and backhoes everywhere, forklifts. So there was always something happening. And then, of course, as I got older, I started doing work experience within our family's business, going out on sites and things.
Yeah.
So for me, like the development of Serac Tech came directly from a problem that my dad faced, or it wasn't necessarily a problem, but it was an opportunity that I saw that I built for him. Was it the same for you?
Not exactly the same. The idea came out of working with another family member, one of my godparents, and I was working with he and his business partner were doing strategic land acquisition. So the job was to go identify sites, build a relationship with the owner, and get planning. The idea for Addland more came out of that than necessarily the construction background.
Okay.
But the construction background definitely helped in the sense of being able to understand the construction world, the property development world, land world. It's all interconnected.
Which is very important from a founder's perspective to have that domain knowledge.
100%. You gotta know your craft. The funny thing is that the longer you do it and the older you get, the less. The more you thought you knew, and then you realize actually the less you know, which is the scary part.
Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty cool how like the previous generation was more in the traditional sort of business setting.
Yeah.
And then we've adopted a more technical approach or built some software to aid the industry.
Yeah, I think prop tech and construction tech, what I like about it is I would still say they're relatively as you said, they're relatively traditional and haven't really been disrupted in a major way. There's obviously some great prop tech solutions out there, Serac Tech being one. And there are some great solutions out there, but no one has really, I think, come up with any. There's no Uber in construction tech,
Well,
there's no Stripe in prop tech. I think it's lack of investment. Prop tech is not usually the place that gets a lot of investment. The investment goes to fintech, health tech, ed tech usually. And in the last couple of years, most of the investment has gone to climate tech, and now AI is the fashionable thing at the moment for VC. So I think it's a lack of investment. I mean, we've, for example, we've never taken on VC money ever. We've survived on angel money. We've raised 10 million to date, and we're raising another 3 million at the moment. So there's not a lot of people who are able to put their hands on that amount of cash and raise that amount of money without it being institutional.
Yeah.
So I think that leads to a reduction in the number of companies that are getting set up in the prop tech and context.
I mean, it's also, so you look at profiles of like fintech companies. So Stripe, taking Stripe as an example, and the adoption of their tech is driven by a customer base that's all fairly similar. Whereas you look at the world of construction and property developers, and you have quite a mix of technically able people or companies. So I think you've got quite a diverse market that has a lot more preferences than something like fintech.
Yeah.
And that's why there's not a de facto Uber type company within the industry.
Yeah, as you say, there's a lot of needs in the industry. There's a lot of different people who perform a range of jobs, and a lot of those people, I think, are in general quite traditional.
Yeah.
And they're not. The construction industry and property industry in general hasn't been massively open to change. And I don't think the planning system helps either. The planning system also needs end-to-end reform, and obviously Michael Gove tried to do that a couple of years ago, but it's I think that also plays a part in the fact that put it like this, I think it's definitely a symbol of the slow-moving change that happens in the construction industry.
Yeah,
it's as slow as getting your planning application through.
Yeah, hopefully we can change that.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone would like that.
Nice point to name drop us. Nice. So what are the kind of like major hurdles that you faced when you first founded Addlands? Any that come into mind?
God. I mean, the first one's obviously, but when you have literally nothing but an idea, the first one is, trying to figure out, and I had no experience setting up a business before. And this was 5 years ago. And the first step is obviously trying to flesh out your idea, trying to figure out, its place in the market.
How on that note, how did you start? Because I got an agency on board, and I don't know if I've shared this story with you, but I got an agency on board, and I obviously didn't have an office at the time. I used to sit on the sofa at home with my laptop on my lap, working through designs with this agency, starting from I have no clue. I have an idea of what we want to build, but I've got no clue what it's going to look like or how it's going to work. Was it the same with you? Was it just you? Or
we did use an agency. So in 2018, I came up with the idea, and I was working for my old boss at the time. He became eventually one of our founding investors, and I think it took me 6 months to convince him that this was a good idea. He thought it was interesting, but big risk. Has never started a company before. I was 25 at the time, and I think I convinced him after about 6 months. So at the time, I was living in Fulham. He was in Sussex. So I was commuting 4 hours a day driving.
Wow.
And I had to be there at 8 a.m. Didn't leave till 5:30. So I didn't have a lot of spare time. So it was really on my evenings and weekends that I was able to work on this idea. And eventually convinced him, and he and another agreed to put in. I think we started with like 750K. So we then went in 2019. We went to a web development agency in Cardiff. So
same.
Yeah, called. God, what were they called? It'll come to me. They were Inspire Tech. That was the one.
That's so weird. We both went to an agency in Cardiff.
Yeah.
I didn't. There's that many.
Yeah, I wish we hadn't, because it was swapping driving from Sussex to Fulham to Cardiff multiple times a week. But they were very old school, and my problem was that I never run a business before in the tech space and didn't know anything about tech stacks. And we ended up, we completely re-platformed now. This was obviously 4 or 5 years ago, but we ended up just building this monolith instead of what we should have done, which was a microservices approach.
It was built, I remember you saying, was it built in C# or something?
It was a mixture of C# .NET, yeah. With a React front end, so the front looked good.
Yeah, at least that worked.
But there's a lot of things that came back to haunt us, and I think bringing this all the way back round onto lessons that we've learned and what were the challenges. It was trying to go on a steep learning curve to understand how do you set up a business? You need to raise money. You need to put corporate governance in place. You need to, suddenly you've got to start knowing about EIS and how to you've got to get lawyers to write agreements so you can take EIS investments, and then you've got to figure out how to build your product and how not to make all the mistakes there, which you do end up making a lot of mistakes. But key is to try not to make them twice.
So I've got asked quite a few times what was the hardest bit. And I mean, I got asked yesterday, like, how many people have you fired? Is it hard to do? I was like, it's not hard to do. It's hard to fire people if they work really hard and they fit into the team really well, but they just don't quite get it. Whereas it's easy to fire people if they join for a week and they have an awful attitude, and then you can just let them go.
Yeah. I mean, we've had to let a lot of people go. Some people have just come and gone naturally. I think over time we've probably had. I mean, the people we have now have been with us probably almost since the start. So, so the ones who stay for a long time, which is always great. But I can't remember who says it. It's one of those things in the business world. They say, hire fast and fire faster.
Exactly.
The cost of having someone around who's either got a bad attitude or is not contributing, and that winds other people up, is far greater than just getting rid of them.
Exactly.
And I even remember one guy, we hired a graphic designer. We hired him on the Monday and we fired him on the Friday.
It's good.
Because it wasn't good for him, but he just wasn't up to the task. But ultimately, that's our mistake for making the hire.
Yeah, I mean, some people slip through the net.
Some people do. We had a guy who was falsifying his sales records at one point. So when we caught him, because obviously we recorded all the calls, and our head of sales noticed that things weren't stacking up. People's the variable. If I could set up a business with just some servers running in the cloud somewhere, just with our products and no people, it'd be perfect.
Yeah. So the biggest naivety that I probably had when starting the company was I thought you could hire. I thought if someone had on their LinkedIn profile, I work in sales, they were a salesperson and they were able to sell.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh yes, let's hire 4 salespeople. And then I didn't realize you actually have emotion that comes with a job.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, what I just said probably sounds a bit crass. At the same time, people's the best part, because you end up, the good people, you end up learning a lot from people. Every day is a school day. And, I've learned an enormous amount from a lot of the people in our team, about different technical disciplines, product, sales, etc., marketing. But also they become, great friends, and it's, seeing all your people here.
Totally agree.
There's obviously people form bonds and relationships, and I think that's also one of the best parts about starting a business is you can build not just your product and your revenue, but you can also build this team, this family, which until it becomes a big corporate, you mostly have control over. In fact, I remember before we opened our office back in August 2020, I sat down one night with a bottle of wine, and I said, right, I'm going to write the company handbook. So I wanted every new starter to have this really nicely presented handbook on top of their laptop on their first day.
Yeah.
And anyway, I was so naive that I thought that you make a company culture by writing a handbook, because everyone's going to read this. Everyone's going to read this, and then they're going to do it. Yeah.
I wrote a culture handbook.
I put in there like dress code, dog policy. I thought this thing was so cool. I sent it off to the graphic designers. I said, do this. I mean, talking about ways we also wasted money along the way. I hope no investors are watching this, but you have to learn. Anyway, not one person read these things, right? So there was a £1,000 of printing and graphic design gone. Anyway, so not one person read this, and I later learned that you don't build a culture by writing a handbook. You build a culture by leading from the front, demonstrating the behaviors. You're in the office late, people understand you need to be in the office later.
With a bottle of wine.
You demonstrate from the front, and then once the culture's in place, then you can support your team from behind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is like that's the most motivating factor for me. It's like, why do I work? For my team. I want to see them do well. They want to see us, like we all want to see each other do well.
Exactly. Sorry, something's coming onto my shoe. I think there's obviously been some other challenges. Competitors as well. We operate in a very competitive space, and you've always got you can feel that heat behind your neck of people breathing down your neck. But that's great. I think that's what pushes you to innovate fast. You look at any other industry, semiconductor industry, NVIDIA back in, I don't know if it was the 90s, but Jensen figured out at the time, I think chips were on a 2-year cycle of innovation. So every 2 years you'd bring out the next generation. And it was back when Microsoft released one of the first versions of DirectX, and NVIDIA basically had made a bet which didn't come off because Microsoft at the last minute changed something. And they then had to figure out they laid off a lot of people, and they then had to figure out how to make chips in 6 months. But they did it. And then after that, they were starting to lead the pack because they could innovate every 6 months.
Crazy company.
Yeah.
It's 200 billion transistors in the size of your fingernail or something?
Yeah, we could go down a whole rabbit hole on that. I was at an investor event the other day, and one of the guys who was speaking on the panel was Herman Hauser. He's the founder of ARM. He's big company. So he's third largest company in Europe and the UK. And he founded ARM. He's a physicist. and he was saying that we've reached the limit of how small we can draw because we've got down to an atom. So, apologies. So we've got down to an atom, and you can't go any smaller than that. And there are these machines that are in Taiwan made by ASML that use ultraviolet light to basically draw these things. It's incredible. But he said the future is quantum, and that's what he's investing in at the moment. Is we're restricted by it's either a 1 or a 0, and quantum basically says it can be 1 and 0 at the same time.
Yeah. I had this discussion yesterday. I also read something the other day which signalled a change back to analog.
Yeah, we spoke about that in the one with Julia Neddo.
Yeah, I mean, it helps if we had someone studying a PhD in AI in the room.
Yeah,
I think we should move back to building materials.
It's much simpler. My brain can't handle this stuff. It is cool.
To touch on the topic, though, I think like what we were discussing in this last podcast was that computing, because the way that computing is designed is you have transistors that will be on or off. With quantum computing, you can have the state of, 1 or 0 at the same time?
Yes, it can operate in multiple states at the same time, which enables for a much wider range of compute.
Yeah.
That's about the limit of my technical knowledge.
Yeah, same. But then within biocomputing, you have neurotransmitters that send signals back and forward. So if you could make your brain a computer, and you could make a human brain the size of this building, the amount of compute that thing would have would just be.
I think Elon's trying to do that. He put a chip in someone recently.
Yeah.
I haven't checked in with the guy. Is he still alive?
He is. I actually saw a video of that the other day.
Yeah, it's interesting, not just on the computing power, but also energy consumption. So one of the guys in the audience at this investor event said that if you get NVIDIA H600s and you rack them and stack them, and you put it like they're drawing some unbelievable amount of energy is required, right? Bitcoin is just basically a collection of GPUs all over the world drawing enough energy to power sort of Argentina for a year or something. It's got that big. It's like the size of somewhere like Argentina or Brazil or something. And Hermann Hauser actually said, the funny thing is there's some laws, some Austrian physicists basically figured out Dax law or something like that. My memory is not great on it.
Hell.
But how big is it?
Between 2020 and 2021, Bitcoin mining consumed enough to rank it as the 27th nation of energy consumption.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Trumping with the likes of Pakistan with a population of 230 million.
So Bitcoin is just a collection of GPUs. So all the miners who are trying to mine Bitcoin in return for crunching these blocks are using all these NVIDIA GPUs, right? And the energy consumption is extremely high. And everyone's always looking at how can we get more computer power out of these chips. But no one's really gone and thought about, well, how can we make them much more efficient? Because this law, I believe it's Dax law, but happy to be proven wrong, basically says there is no lower bound for energy consumption. And what that means is it is technically possible to produce a chip that does whatever we want it to do and basically requires 0 energy, like something, but like a watch battery could power a laptop for a year type scenario. Slight problem is it also has to be held at absolute 0, so minus 270 Kelvin. So that's quite a bit of an issue, but once we sort that out. So anyway, I'm super excited by AI and quantum and nuclear fusion.
So what we also discussed the other day was Altman's phrase of steamrolling. Have you heard of that?
No.
So Sam Altman basically said, don't try and challenge us because you're going to get steamrolled, which is very, very valid. So on the notion of Planda, if we tried to produce Planda 5 years ago, it would have cost us 10 million quid in development costs. But now it's like, it's a hell of a lot more attainable because of the development of AI. So like I wouldn't invest in producing anything over the scope of what's technologically capable at the moment. Because I know that in 6 months' time, whatever we produce
there's a well-known business law for that, which basically says, you have an idea, and that it basically says that you can wait for the costs to come down, and the costs come down on a linear scale compared to time. based on new technology coming into the market, and an idea you had 5 years ago that wasn't possible then is possible today.
Yeah.
Should we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole. Apologies, I think I set us on the rabbit hole course.
I think it's
We
good.
wanted to talk about steamrolling a little bit, though, didn't we? What was the question?
I do this with my team. They absolutely hate it. I'll just go off on some tangent.
So back to like starting and founding the business. So the hardest bit for me, which I was coming on to, was, or if someone says to me, what's the hardest part? I always say finding the first few people.
Yes.
Because that sets the culture.
Yes.
Whereas we have a team of roughly 40 people now that if someone joins, they see that we're a great culture. They see that everyone works really hard. They know that it's a nice environment to work in. So they go, okay, I want to match that. And there's not much influence from me. There's not much influence from their direct manager, but the influence is from the wider team around them.
Yeah.
And the hardest bit is getting those first 4 people
100%.
that are aligned with you, that believe in what you're doing, that like what you're doing, that are similar to you, because you really need to get on with your first few people.
Yeah.
Like you need to be able to
it's definitely one of the key parts at the beginning of the journey to get right. And I think we didn't give enough time to it, but we just got very lucky. And that's also another thing. There's a great podcast called How I Built This, which Guy Raz hosts in the US. And at the end of every one, he interviews, James Dyson, Howard Schultz, and all these, Joe Gebbia, these absolute legends. And at the end of every hour podcast, he asks one question, same one every time. He says, how much of your success do you believe was luck, and how much was hard work? And you've got to have a lot of luck. And in general, I think it's 50-50. It's like the average of what everyone said ever. And we've had a lot of luck along the way, including our first hires. One of our first hires, he's still with us, and that was 5 years ago.
Nice.
Brandon, what do you believe your success is?
I think hard work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's lucky. It's lucky. I'd consider it lucky that we're sitting in a room right now having this discussion.
Yeah.
But it's the opportunity for us to meet.
Yeah.
Was through hard work.
And
it's also it's not true. Luck. It's not luck that we get on.
Yeah.
It's like if I had an awful attitude, or you had an awful attitude, and we both went, I don't want to meet that guy.
Yeah.
That would be unlucky. But if you have a good attitude, you work hard.
Yeah. I think I do believe it is hard work, because it requires starting a business, being a little bit insane, be a little bit of arrogance almost, because you've got to believe that you can do a better job than someone else, or that you're so clever that you've thought of something that no one else has. It's either one of those two things. And then you've got to work damn hard. But I just still think there's been moments, the serendipity of meeting for sure. That we've had clients who have come from just the most serendipitous meetings, where we got lucky that I bumped into that person on that day who happened to be that, and we ended up getting a major client.
Yeah.
I think those are the kind of lucky moments I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And even on the bad days, a little bit lucky that the thing that's not working hasn't taken down your entire platform.
On that note, so I'll contradict myself. I'm extremely lucky. So our biggest customer, I got introduced to him, or the guy who runs the company, through me doing a demo probably 3.5 years ago. I did a demo to this guy, got on really well with him. And he goes to me, oh, you need to meet my friend. You would love him, and you would love what he does. So let me put you two in touch. And if I didn't do that demo, that introduction wouldn't have happened.
And you know what? This is what I really love about the tech space. I love that in general, people are always up for, hey, can I introduce you?
As opposed to the property development space.
Yeah, which is obviously a lot more traditional. I like that people want to introduce people to other people in this space. They generally want to help you out. Every day is a school day. You're meeting people all the time, expanding your knowledge, expanding your ideas, meeting up with people, seeing what you can do together.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things I do love about the space.
It's fun.
It's the lifeblood of any startup, is being given the opportunities to meet people you're either going to hire, invest in you, or sell your product to.
Exactly. And it's networking, which we've discussed, we discussed on Sunday, which is very important.
Relationships. It's everything. Exactly. Relationships.
That's another thing. So going back to the steamrolling thing, like if with costs coming down dramatically of access to producing cool tools and cool pieces of software, relationships are going to prevail to be way more important factors to success than anything else.
Well, I think with AI also, we'll be able to do a lot of the jobs that we currently pay people to do.
Which will mean everyone has access to the same resources.
Exactly. So people's time will be freed up to do the things that only humans can do.
Yeah.
which is sit down, talk to each other, share ideas.
Yeah.
The filing your VAT return and having a financial controller to do that can all be automated by AI.